Good afternoon. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing for April 24th. Please rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First calendar item number or roll call for attendance.
Roll call, Mr. Bacilli. Present. Mr. D'Angelo. Present. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni. Present. Mr. Tucker.
Present.
Present. Mr. Pelton. Present. Quorum is present. First matter before the board is application A1903. This is continued from the meeting of 3/27/19, the application of BC Boston Development LLC, 141 Tremont Street, Boston, requesting a parking variance reducing the number of parking spaces required by 70 parking spaces in the Wonderland Transit-Oriented Development District at 646 Ocean Avenue to enable the appellant to construct a 7-story, 219 apartment unit, mixed-use residential, retail, and restaurant use building.
So this meeting took place last month and a presentation was conducted. Is there anyone in the audience that... One moment, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I failed to indicate that both Mr. D'Angelo and Mr. Bacilli were absent at the last meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, in accordance with the provisions of Section 23D of Chapter 39, as amended by Chapter 79 of the Acts of 2006, they have examined all of the records of the Revere Zoning Board of Appeals relative to the adjudicatory public hearings that we are conducting, and they have reviewed all of the applications from A19, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, and 12. So they are eligible to vote on these matters.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that did not see the presentation? Okay, so just where this is a public hearing, I will ask if there are any proponents that did not speak last time. If you'd still want to speak, Bob, come right up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bob O'Brien. I'm Director of Economic Development for the City of Revere. I live at 10 Ocean Avenue. I'm here to reiterate the support of the city for your approval of this application. I would note just two things that I noted in my testimony last time, that of the 70 parking spaces that are being requested a variance for, 40 of them relate to a commercial component for which parking will be made available in the MBTA garage. So only 30 of the spaces actually relate to the residential component, and they are still consistent with the actual operating ratios for other developments in that area. Importantly, our support for this is conditioned on your approval, as you typically do, of the 5 conditions that we have outlined in our letter of support that assure that this variance will have no adverse effect on the surrounding community, particularly with regard to parking on street on Ocean Avenue. With that, we strongly urge your support and we appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I might also add, Councillor Novoselsky is not here, but did testify in favor, and I believe reiterates his support as well. Thank you.
And he called me tonight to state the same, that he is in favor of this application. Okay, are there any other proponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Are there any opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any members wish to speak? Roll call.
The question now comes on granting the relief requested by the appellant. Mr. Bacilli? Yes. Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes. This is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Appreciate your time.
Does anybody want to dismantle this?
Yeah, he's going to dismantle that.
The next application before the board is application A1904. This is a special permit application continued from the meeting of 3/27/19. The application of Christine McCarron, 450 Revere Beach Boulevard, Revere, requesting a 6-month extension of City of Revere's Zoning Board of Appeals variance A1704 to enable the appellant to further alter and extend a pre-existing non-conforming structure to convert a single-family dwelling to a two-family dwelling on Lot Part C at 450 Revere Beach Boulevard, Revere.
Please press the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Christine McCarron, 450 Revere Beach Boulevard.
Okay. Where it's a public hearing, I will ask if there's any of the proponents. Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. I believe that there was one question as far as the parcel, the way it was listed on the original application. Am I correct, John? Was that corrected? Did you bring, he did not receive anything to show
I didn't
that that
realize
was-
I was supposed to bring, I can show you now what happened, but I'm sorry, I
But
didn't
that was
realize
supposed
that
to
I
be
was supposed to be
corrected.
the
The
one.
last meeting, we said that you'd have to have that corrected on the plan and bring it to the city clerk's office.
The plan is correct, it's just the write-up, the special permit itself that's not correct. And I apologize, I thought you said that you were going to look into it. I didn't realize I was supposed to do something there. But basically, when you, in Lot C is where he wrote proposed building, but then he put an arrow, and I think they just didn't see the arrow when they wrote up the special permit. But it was always intended to be in Lot 4, which is where the existing structure is.
Can you press the button?
Mr. Chairman, the previous special permit was issued to Lot C.
Can I approach and just show you what I think happened when they did the write-up, when they wrote up the special permit?
If you will, yeah. I believe that we're going to have to continue this and, we're going to have to establish a new, hearing. I think we have to continue. They'll have to correct it, correct?
So in a sense, the special permit contradicts itself because it says in the site of a proposed, I mean, the site of the existing building, but then it says Lot C, so that it's just, should be changed to Lot 4, because that is where the existing building is sitting. It's easy to see why they got confused. But it's not actually a change to the application, it was just a clerical error in writing up the actual special permit.
But the application says Lot C, am I correct? The application itself says Lot C. So the application is incorrect. And that you can, from what I gathered last month, the opposition was because you can sell off Lot C, D, and E, and it's stating that Lot C on the application. So that was the question last month, that had to be corrected.
How would I go about getting that corrected?
there a motion to continue? Roll call on motion to continue, so this can be looked into.
Question comes on continuing this matter to the next meeting, which is, what's the date?
Let's just see what the name is. May 22nd. Which one, 22nd or 29th? May 22nd.
Question now comes on continuing this application to May 22nd at 4 p.m. Mr. Bacilli? Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
This matter is continued to resolve this issue of the lot.
So what do I need to do in the meantime? No, I did it.
Well, Lot 4 is the only lot that has a structure on it.
Right.
Lot Part C does not. This is an old plan showing proposed four-story family with wood frame dwelling.
Yeah, that was when I was going to take the,
That's
but
gotta-
that was a two-family.
I think
You know,
it's
that
gotta
was
be-
the
I think-
original.
The plan has to be corrected to show the two family.
Well, the plan is correct.
It's not because it shows, it shows,
It shows a two-family.
but it's showing on lot C.
No, there's an arrow that points to lot 4.
It has to be on lot 4. It can't have anything to do with lot C,
So you just want him to move that text?
right? And then the application has to be for lot 4, not lot C. So we can correct the application, but that plot plan has to be corrected to show lot 4. Nothing to do with D or E, if that's the other three lots.
Well, I think he just put the arrow because it was a lot going on lot 4, but there is an arrow that clearly shows that it's supposed to be on lot 4.
But the confusion is, people were asking if you're gonna sell off them lots, which you can, and it should have nothing depicted on it for lot 4.
Right?
This has to be removed. Post four-story
That's the correct.
in the land. Two is hidden underneath the land.
This is the same plan type.
So please have that correct.
Just to make sure I do this correctly, you just want him to take those 3 lines of text and try to just put them onto lot 4?
To have it all listed as lot 4. Correct. Nothing to do with lot C. Even, and then we'll have to alter the application to say that it's only lot 4, not lot C.
And who do I give that to?
You have to give the new plot plan to the city clerk's office
Okay, thank you.
before we can vote on it.
Okay, thanks.
Closed. We already continued it. And it's valid because you did bring it up, so they have to correct that in order for us to even vote on the extension.
Well, I think you'd ask the building inspector about this. And he said because the four lots are contiguous, they're owned by the same person, and the original application showed a 9,000 square foot parcel, they keep subdividing it, because he only showed half.
That's him. We want ours corrected to vote on it, then he can do for not a subdivision.
Grant variance,
We're going to be, our decision is to give an extension on her variance, a 6-month extension.
you gave us a special permit, not a variance.
We gave her both, but for the 6-month extension that they're asking for, that's the decision we have to make. You're welcome.
The next application before the board is application A1905, continued from the meeting of April 27th, 19. Application of Paul E. Rupp Jr. and Heidi K. Rupp, 371 Revere Street, Revere, appealing from the decision of the Inspector of Buildings of the City of Revere, wherein the Inspector of Buildings has allowed the use of the building at 375 Revere Street, which the appellant alleges is in violation of the City of Revere zoning ordinances. The appellant requests the ZBA to reverse the decision of the Inspector of Buildings and to order a cease and desist notice relative to the building permit issued at 375 Revere Street, issued on February 4, 2019. The appellant further requests the ZBA to find that the former use at 375 Revere Street, wholesale product distribution, was illegal. Further, the appellant requests the ZBA to find that the proposed use is prohibited by the City of Revere zoning ordinances because the proposed use is a change or extension of the use that is more detrimental than the prior use, thereby changing the quality and character of the neighborhood.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Paul Rupp, 371 Revere Street, appellant.
So you did have a community meeting, from what I gather, and
Yes.
what was the outcome as far as you're concerned on the community meeting?
Well, I'd like to ask an unbiased person, our ward counselor, Arthur Guanasso, to explain.
He will speak, but I'm asking you
Mine?
before I go for the,
Okay, specifically, the general consensus of the neighborhood was that they don't want this business at 375 Revere Street, Air Culinaire. That if it somehow gets ordered to the city council to seek a special permit, then the neighbors would then come to the table and ask for conditions. And I believe most of the neighbors will work with them.
okay, so you did not request any conditions this evening yourself?
Well, we're here, I did not, because we're here on my appeal from the grant of the building permit. This is not an application for a variance. This is an appeal of the building inspector's issuance of a building permit to install a commercial kitchen.
Okay. All right, seeing that it's a public hearing, I will ask if there's any proponents, and the ward councilor can get up and speak if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I asked for that meeting to be held, and it was graciously hosted by Mr. Bianco and his family at the site so that we could give everybody a eye view of what's going to take place there. And through the night, through the conversation that was discussed, people aren't really strongly opposed to anything, but they just want a little justification. They want a little bit of help. And in some of the terminology that was used was, you know, we could live with this, but we can't do this. And there was many infractions that they lived with on a daily basis on a business that was there for many, many years. They really didn't have any input as to that location. But now it's a new area, and we have a new game in town, and it's a new player. And I think the neighbors could work with this individual because they seem to be very reputable. They seem to be a company who will work the neighborhood. But there are some conditions that were spoke of that there wasn't too much flexibility. And the general consensus was somewhat to this degree. If a special permit was requested from the city council, there again, the city council could place conditions, and conditions that both sides could live with. Now, obviously, the new tenant is under time constraints because he has X number of days to get in there in order to get his business going. But these folks who live next to that location and around that location have the rest of their lives to live there. So we're really in a game here. And so what we're asking of, I asked the chair, if we can find a legal way for this to be remanded over to the city council, and I'm very fortunate enough to be the president at the time, I will promise to everybody we will get speedy results, one way or the other. We won't delay this any further. We'll get, we want to work with the neighborhood. We want to work with the new tenant. We want to work with the Bianco family to get that location occupied. We're all in awareness of everything that has to take place there. But what we're looking for, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, is if this would be remanded over to the city council, just for these special permits, not that the city council is looking for this intention. We certainly don't want that. And we certainly don't want to infringe upon the rights and the membership of this commission. We don't want to oversee that either. What we're trying to do is remedy a problem that I think can be had. I think we can come up to a conclusion that will be satisfactory to both parties. I think it's worth a shot, and I think it's an effort that I would love to see happen, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? If you spoke last month, you don't need to speak again, but if you'd like to come up, if you didn't speak last month, then fine.
Hello, Corey DePina, McKinley Street. The meeting went very well. There wasn't any huge sway left or right for it or against it. However, it did bring up a lot of questions. People do work really hard to own and have a home. This company will be moving in with no restrictions. There's a school there, there's trucks possibly going by, there's noise pollution, 24 consistent. There are hour things on the hours of operation that aren't clear. So there's a lot of questions that we have, and if it goes through with no type of regulations or even conversation, they have free will to do whatever they want, expand however they want in the future, and we have no way to stop it once it gets there. It's a big elephant in the neighborhood, and we understand that, and it's a big issue, but we want to make sure that whatever gets there stays there, and we can work together to keep it there and be happy.
Thank you. Is there any other proponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side. Are there any opponents? Opponents, you already spoke. So are there any new opponents? Anyone that has not already spoken on this? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. So it's my understanding that we could not remand this to the city council. If the applicant does not want to offer any conditions to be placed on the current decision of the building inspector, then we will just be voting on either we uphold the decision of the building inspector or deny the decision of the building inspector. Is that correct, the way you understand this?
I don't understand how that's even a possibility. That I could offer conditions?
Well, we asked if there's a meeting and come up with some conditions last month, because you didn't have any type of a meeting. So I believe there was a community meeting on this because there was a lot of misunderstandings by residents that got some letter and some didn't, and
This is an appeal of the building inspector's decision to grant a building permit. How could this board have the authority to grant conditions that have any force to them?
we don't. So that's what I'm saying. Are we going to be voting?
But why is it, are you?
Well, because
asking for
last month there
conditions?
was a lot of misunderstanding, if you recall, by letters that went out stating all of this information so that they wanted to have a public meeting with the ward councilor. Now, that happened. It didn't get anywhere from what I gather. So our vote would be to sustain the building inspector's decision or decline the decision of the building inspector. And that's what you would like. You want the decision of the building inspector
Well,
to be
I
overturned.
want a continuance now, because if you're telling me that I could have had legitimate conditions brought to this board, then I would have.
I'm not telling you that. That's what that was the understanding that I got last month.
You're asking me, does the appellant have conditions that they would like to present to the board? And if in fact I can present.
Isn't that what was stated? You had a negotiating meeting, so if that didn't take anywhere,
You asked us to have, the board asked us to have an informational meeting.
and come back with a decision.
And we did.
to learn more about what they were going to do. The board never asked us to come back with conditions.
Through the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the members, the board has a decision tonight to either sustain the decision of the building inspector or deny the decision of the building inspector. There was a community meeting to attempt to resolve and iron out differences. Apparently, the differences have not been ironed out. There does not seem to be a middle ground that has been presented to this board.
Point of information, Mr. Clerk. There was a meeting of the minds there, and I stated that clearly, that we could meet, and we could meet with certain conditions. That's why I asked that this be remanded over to the City Council for set of conditions. We're ready to go forward with these set of conditions that was mutually agreed upon by everybody. The only couple of things that we had was the hours of operation and a few other little things that we could work on. But there was a very progressive meeting held, and the outcome was not reached, but yet we were in agreement with one thing, that we could, both sides could live with some conditions. Not saying that everyone will agree with them, but at least we have a meeting point where we can come with a judgment that's beneficial to both sides. Now, if we are led to believe now, we walk out of here and we can only take it of the voice of the building inspector or not, that's not allowing us to do conditions. And that's the thing we're pleading for, is the opportunity to offer some conditions so that this can be satisfactorily worked out.
Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend that if they wish to sit and speak some more, that this matter be tabled until they can work an agreement.
We could not mandate this back for a special permit to the city council.
If we can work it out tonight, we can work it out tonight. Just give us some time to meet in a side room. I can provide that, and we can come back before you conclude your meeting.
Both sides are agreeable to
If you're both agreeable to that, then
I haven't had the, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. Earl Duvall, I represent the White Family Trust. I have a different understanding as to what was asked and what we embarked upon with regards to this neighborhood meeting. We showed up with the neighborhood meeting anticipating being able to perhaps negotiate, discuss, understand what type of conditions might be acceptable to the neighborhood and to the proposed tenant, Air Culinaire. Attorney Rupp would not discuss any conditions at that meeting. He stated he would not discuss those conditions until this board met and reached a decision on whether or not it was a legal non-conforming use or an expansion. So I drafted, and I'm not sure if the members of the board had seen those, I had sent those, and I clearly put on there that those are proposed conditions. I've not reviewed those or discussed those with Attorney Rupp. I have discussed those briefly with Arthur, the ward counselor, but we have not done that. I mean, I feel as if, we went to that meeting and it was a very heated meeting, and I appreciate everyone's time and effort, but we're here, and time is of the essence with regards to, the tenant and the tenant being able to get, moving. I understand, and I don't disagree with you, Mr. Chairman, or with Attorney Rupp, that, with regards to the enforceability of the, conditions with this, appeal. I don't know how to fix that. So, I mean, I'm not sure that it's productive for us to, to have any further, discussions at this point.
okay.
Thank you.
Would there be conditions made on our ruling? What did he say? I'm asking the clerk a question. I'm not on the mic. What's the wish of the members?
During the meeting, there were some variances that were brought up that are current variances that the new proposed tenant didn't even know of. And they also restrict the way that
Okay,
they
but since
intend to
there's no
operate there.
consensus from the person that's presenting this the application to reverse the decision of the building inspector, am I correct that that's pretty much what you're asking for? Is it for us to reverse the decision that was made by the building inspector?
Yes,
Okay.
but I'd like to make a motion to sustain what the building inspector did.
So there's a motion on the floor.
In my opinion, everybody.
Roll call, roll call.
The question before the board is to sustain the decision of the building inspector. Mr. Bacilli? Mr. Bacilli?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes. The decision of the building inspector is sustained.
Next calendar item number.
The next application before the board is application A-1906, a special permit application continued from the meeting of April 27th, 19. The application of Joseph Champa, 42 Joey Road, Revere, requesting a special permit to enable the appellant to raise an existing building located at 415, 417 Lee Burbank Highway, Revere, to construct 4 commercial garages and storage areas with private office space above the garages. The commercial garages and storage areas will be used for the storage of construction materials and vehicles with private office areas above the garages. The site is proposed to contain 16 parking spaces, including 4 interior garage spaces.
This was an application from last month. Are there anybody in the audience that would like to have a presentation made? The presentation was made last month. Okay. I'm going to do that now. Are there any proponents? First, I'd ask the ward council if he wished to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is Lee Burbank Highway, if I'm correct?
Yes.
Okay, the site of the current former diner?
Yes.
Okay. I did talk to Mr. Hennigan on this, and there's the diner, right? And I told him my concerns about the wall, cliff in the back, to make sure he stays away from the cliff on the construction or puts up a retaining wall. So that was one of my, I have no objections to this. It's a use of a dead space, and it's on a major highway. It's not near any homes per se. There are some condos a couple hundred feet away, but there's a fence abutting it, and if the neighbors wanted a new fence up there, that's something we can still discuss with them. And other than that, I think it's a decent use for that property. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other proponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. The only thing that we made a ruling was that there'd be no activity in the parking lot. Am I correct? I'm not sure exactly how we worded that.
Storage of construction material of any type in the lot.
So no storage of any construction material in the lot itself. Well, they're going to use the garages, so there'll be no commercial vehicles in the parking lot as well. No storage of commercial vehicles or equipment, materials. So, yes, please.
Well, there'll be no, when you say commercial vehicles, there's a possibility that this could be like companies that have vans, like a appliance repair type place. So it's possible they could have the van with the writing on it in the parking lot.
Mr. Chairman, I did talk to Mr. Hennigan about that. He did say one of the potential tenants was going to be like a glass company, so he was going to have, a van, for vehicles. Something like, I'm talking about more large-scale vehicles. I just don't want it to be a commercial lot with oversized vehicles and stuff like that, so I don't know how we would handle something like that.
So no construction equipment?
No construction equipment,
Materials?
And, does that open it up to, like the cranes that are down on Usher Road?
No, don't,
It's not going to be that type of use.
The garage was intended for the
Right.
purpose of parking the vehicle.
What's your wish, Counselor? I mean,
I could live with a van, but, I
but we
don't want
can't
15
stipulate
vans.
the make and
I
model
don't
or
want
something on
15
that.
vans,
Can we do
it's,
it by weight?
well,
Because if this isn't going to be a yard that a crane company, like
Right.
Shaughnessy is not going to want to be here, it's too small. But there might be some pickup trucks, but those are what we would be expecting I mean like dump trucks, those are what we'd be expecting would be inside.
Could you read what we already stated, John?
The condition would be that there shall be no storage of construction materials, equipment, or construction vehicles on the lot.
I think that's fair.
okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
of van.
But construction vehicles?
Yeah, construction is correct, commercial is different. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, I have to, hurry, my clock. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mostly vans, pickup trucks, no large construction. We don't want small dump trucks. We don't want multiple, let's see, 10 vehicles.
He wants large, put large construction
Yeah,
vehicles.
So,
I don't know how far we can
can we,
enforce that.
can we,
I always have to go by weight.
can we
Yeah.
call it a service vehicles rather than construction?
That's perfect.
Well, no construction vehicles, but service vehicles, then.
That's that's just as broad, but, okay.
Okay, thank you.
No storage of construction materials, commercial vehicles, construction equipment, service vehicles, I don't know where you would put service vehicles.
They want to allow service vehicles, is what he's saying. Okay.
So, I mean, a commercial vehicle might encompass a service vehicle.
A commercial vehicle would encompass a van, a pickup truck. So you don't want to restrict commercial vehicles, you just want to restrict construction vehicles, which is very broad. But we can just put construction vehicles, and if something happens, the ward councilor as determined by the building inspector. Roll call.
Mr. Bacilli?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes, this is granted, subject to conditions.
Thank you, board members, for your time.
You're welcome.
The next application before the board is application A-1908, continued for the meeting of 3/27/19. Application of Brian Cooley, 364 Ocean Avenue, number 1109, Revere, requesting a minimum side yard, front yard, rear yard, open space, maximum principal building coverage, height, stories, and further requesting a variance of open space in the front yard and a variance relative to minimum qualifying lot area of 4,000 square feet to enable the appellant to construct a two-family, three-story dwelling at 261 Bellingham Ave, Revere.
Please step up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Corey Rhodes, I'm an attorney with the Ambrosio Brown LLP, 14 Proctor Avenue in Revere. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have, relying on our prior presentation. I think the only question that had come up at the last hearing was in regards to two of the parking spaces, whether they would be side by side, or we had presented also another option of doing a tandem driveway for those spaces. My client's willing to do whatever's in the board's thoughts on this issue. And again, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I would like to know what's the last plot plan that was presented depicting the parking?
I have a copy here. The last plot plan that was depicted was the tandem driveway. If you'd like, I could.
I just want to see what John has.
Have the tandem, it looks like to the easterly side.
Correct. That's coming off of Brad Street, or Brad Street Avenue.
Two underground spaces under the building.
Correct.
Two tandem. In normal, single or two-family districts, we allow tandem on the side yards for parking.
Can I just see the plan was changed a few times, so I want to make sure. So this is the plan that was proposed by the ward councillor after speaking to the abutters. Am I correct?
Correct.
Although I disagreed with it, but the ward councillor was concerned.
I think her concern was that we might be taking away one of the off-street parking spaces, or excuse me, one of the on-street parking spaces for a neighbor. And that by
So this
doing-
plan that we have is not that one. Could you please show John the one that, yours is the tandem with one in front of each other. It's not a 20-foot wide parking space. So that's 20 feet wide, so it's taken away more parking spaces. Right. Okay, so this is the one right here, the two, one right in front of it. That's almost at the property line. That's the one that the ward councillor
Correct.
and the abutters wanted.
Correct.
Okay. Does everyone understand that? Seeing that it's a public hearing, I will ask if there's any other proponents. Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any members wish to speak? So just for the clarification, at the last meeting, it was requested by the ward councillor that rather than having a driveway that's 20 foot wide, she felt that some of the abutters felt it was taking up valuable parking spaces. Although I disagreed because it's almost on the corner, they went back and did tandem parking almost at the left of the property line. And that's what the ward councillor requested. So is there a motion to approve, deny, accept? Okay, a motion to approve is on the table.
Mr.
Roll
Chairman,
call.
when we approve this, we're going to be approving both a variance and a special permit. Question comes on granting, foregoing. Mr. Bacilli? Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes, this is granted.
Thank you very much.
The next application before the board is application A1909, the application of Virgilou Pavlou, 102 Kimball Ave, Revere, requesting a variance to enable the appellant to construct a 9-foot 4-inch by 9-foot 4-inch unenclosed exterior deck with rear stairs and a 1-foot shed roof overhanging adjacent to the stairs at 102 Kimball Avenue, Revere.
And, okay,
Good afternoon, Attorney Laureen Scatino. I'm representing Virgil Pavlou with an address of 245 Sumner Street, Suite 110 in East Boston.
okay. Seeing that it's a public hearing, are there any proponents? Now, are you the ward councilor for this? Do you have anything to speak on? Because I don't believe you got to speak at the last meeting and then we spoke after this.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the commission. I did do a site visit, and I met with the applicant. And what he wants to do is basically extend his deck. He already extended the house. Wants to extend the deck a little. He has an autistic child that needs some private room space outside the house. So he wants to extend the deck, and underneath is a access way into the basement, basically. So it's not a public type access point. So I have no problem with it. Thank you.
Okay, and just for the edification of the public, there was concern of myself and another member that they clean up the yard, and they totally agreed that they will be doing that, and that was spoken to by the ward councilor. So are there any other proponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any members wish to speak? What's the wish of the members?
Question comes on granting the relief requested by the appellant. Mr. Bacilli?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes, granted.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The next application before the board is application A1910, the application of Rising Community and Housing, Inc., 787 North Shore Road, Revere, requesting a parking variance to enable the appellant to complete construction and occupation of a 30 residential unit apartment with commercial unit with 19 parking spaces, excuse me, at 43 Nahat Ave, Revere.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Corey Rhodes. I'm an attorney with D'Ambrosio Brown, LLP, 14 Proctor Avenue in Revere. This is a project that was before you approximately a year and a half ago for a veterans preferred apartment building on Shirley Ave. Unfortunately, in the midst of construction, it was realized that 2 of the parking spaces that had been proposed were no longer possible. One of the spaces was related to the commercial tenant coming into the building. They're trying to have a restaurant there, a little cafe there, and it turned out there just wasn't enough space to make any type of use like that possible. So they've built out a refrigerator, and that has taken up the majority of what would have been one of the parking spaces. The other space is related to an electrical transformer. This was proposed in the plans, but when the required ballards to protect the transformer from cars were put in, that also encroached in the parking space and made it not a valid space any longer. These are unfortunate things, and they, I think my client's gone over this with their architect and engineer, how they were not brought before the board in the first place, and they do apologize for that. We do need to remember that these are all single bedroom units. There are no 2 bedrooms, there are no 3 bedrooms in this building. This is a 4-minute walk from the Revere Beach T-station. And again, it's veterans preferred. This is a building that has a good use. This isn't just your kind of standard commercial building where a landlord is trying to maximize their rents. With all those things, we would be happy to answer any questions, and we ask for your support.
Are there any other proponents? And now that the ward councilor is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Again, Ira Novoselsky, 53D Hone Street, Ward 2 councilor. I happen to live right around the corner from this facility. I was one of the initiators of having this building built. And unfortunately, these two items came up, which were unforeseen, between National Grid and the service to the restaurant, which the mayor supports, and he encouraged the little cafe with outdoor seating there. So, and we still have a memorial stone, Veterans Memorial Stone, being placed on the Nehant Ave side. So I know it's unfortunate, but I have no problem with the reduction down to 19 spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. For the edification of the public, this had to be advertised due to a typographical error. So this hearing was advertised. I do not see anybody as an opponent. The proponent, the ward councilor, was spoken to and, of course, presented this evening. One of the major things here was the electrical transformer. And that was unforeseen, but the commercial tenant having to reduce a parking space for refrigeration unit, the ward council is in agreement. And
Question now comes on granting the relief requested by the appellant. Mr. Bacilli? Yes. Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Yes. Mr. Tucker?
yes.
Yes, this is granted. The next application before the board is application A-1911. It's a special permit application of Hector Garcia and Annabelle Mujo, 74 Hurd Street, Chelsea, requesting a special permit and variance to enable the appellants to modify a non-conforming single-family dwelling by converting the building to a two-family dwelling with parking in the front yard at 61 Kingman Avenue, Revere. We have a new plan that was presented also, I believe. It shows 4 parking spaces.
He has to present us the plan.
Two in the front yard, 2 on the side.
And this is in Councilor Keefe's ward, I believe, right? Charlie Patch, okay. So the plan was received by everybody in your packet, but that's the larger version. Seeing it's a public hearing, are there any proponents? Anyone in favor? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Are there any opponents? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any members wish to speak? Just for the edification of the members, there was, the plan was requested that they depict all 4 parking spaces on there. There's a tandem plus the front yard.
But there's also already front yard parking there now, correct?
Nothing is actually being changed. It's just going to be marked out, the parking spaces. But everything, the whole area is paved already.
Okay.
Can you depict where the stairs are? We'll have to take that and show.
That's exactly the same to what I have.
So it's where this concrete pad is, that's where the side entrance is. That's the entrance to the property? There's an entrance at the front over here. So there's an entrance right here at the front, and then the side entrance right here. This one goes straight down. And then there's another entrance over here.
Okay, but there's a main entrance in the front where the parking spaces are, correct?
That's the main entrance to the first, which is to the top floor. And then this one is the
side door that goes down to the basement, and this one's a side door that goes down to the basement as well.
So would we have to have them depict the staircase on the front of the plans?
It only shows a couple of lines here, and there's no indication that that's an entrance. I mean, you could have them submit the plan before the decision is issued.
So if we make a decision that it's contingent on the new plan being depicted with the front entrance? Okay. So if you could call that out, please. There was proponents last month, the abutter to the right is in favor of this. The abutter to the left had no comments as well. I did tour the property, and the abutter to the right was actually outside, and he had no issues with this. The one to the left didn't answer the door, but one of the residents there did state that the owner wasn't there, but the residents did state that the owner was aware and of the letter that he received, and that he was not in opposition to this as well.
They should call out all of the stairwells to this house. There's a big concrete pad over here. I'm not sure what that means versus smaller concrete pads here and there. There's no concrete pad shown on the front. They should call out all the entrances.
So if we can make that part of our decision, that the plan, you'll have to submit a new plan, a plot plan depicting all of the entrances with the stairs, call out all of the stairs surrounding the house.
Ready? Question comes on granting the relief requested, subject to the condition that the appellant files a new plan showing the stairs to the dwelling on all sides. Mr. Bacilli?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
It's granted, subject to the conditions. That
You're welcome.
plan should be submitted by next week at the very latest.
Next week, okay. No problem. Thank you very much.
The next application before the board is application A1913. The application of Abdul Hamid Berkaran, 33 Cambridge Street, requesting a parking variance and parking in the front yard to enable the appellant to convert a single-family dwelling to a two-family dwelling at 33 Cambridge Street. Sure. Just one for the record here.
I have photos, 5 of them, I have one for it. That's the plan there.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Joseph Cottogio, 1 Sprague Street, Revere, representing the applicant who is seeking to convert a single-family home into a two-family home at 33 Cambridge Street and requires a parking variance. The application presented is a proposed basement unit which can be installed or implemented into the property without any exterior construction required. There would be no required expansion of the existing foundation or structure at all. The area is present and can be made in full compliance with all zoning ordinances, subject to obviously this proposed variance. The variance that's requested is for a single parking space. The property has 3 paved front yard parking spaces existing. They're pre-existing. We had attempted to measure out an additional space along the side of the property, but there's a patio brick with brick stairs on both sides and an entrance to the basement that prohibit that. What I've shown you here on the plan is what I feel is a viable fourth space that is available should it be necessary. Now, I would contend on behalf of my client that a fourth space is unlikely to be needed for this property. The proposed unit is a single-bedroom unit in the basement area and would likely only require the one parking space. Should a second space be needed by the tenant in the unlikely event, the area that's marked out on the plan, the street area, would be available to them and nobody else because it would be in back of an existing parking space. So no other party would be street parking in back of an open driveway. But the tenant, if they needed two spaces, could do that. So we feel that this is a very reasonable and viable option to allow the one space variance that's being applied for. Now, the pictures that I presented also show a portion of the front lot line that is marked out by a brick wall with some wrought iron railing. We looked at the possibility, and it is an option, of removing that to allow a fourth space in the front yard. We had done that previously in other applications. That too would also require a front yard variance or an open space variance. But if it's preferred by the board, we would withdraw the current application and reapply with the four spaces. We did contact the ward councilor. We know that there was correspondence that indicated as a policy he's opposed to parking variances because of the limited street parking. We believe we've at least made a presentation that shows that should not be a concern here. Again, we feel it's unlikely a fourth space would be needed. There's also an area available for that, but we would also give the board an option if they direct us to seek that fourth space in the front with four spaces across. I hope I've provided you all the information, and we're here for any questions that you might have.
Okay. Seeing that this is a public hearing, are there any proponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. I do have to stress that Councilor Keefe did present a letter for last month's meeting, and again this month he still stated that he's opposed to this and asked the board to decline. However, have you spoken to him about the fourth space, that you would take down the front and ask for a variance for open space? And
the only reason I had not is because, again, this is personally, I had an similar application a couple times back, and he had no problem with that. We just feel, again, that the removal of the wall is not the best option. But if it's something that the board feels like it's the only option for approval, we would do that. But we're just weighing the equities. Again, the unlikeliness of the unlikelihood of needing that fourth space with regard to removing an open space area on a part of a street that would only be available to the tenant anyway. So all you would really be doing is removing an open front yard area and moving a street space into that space that would only be used by the tenant anyway, because it would be partially in back of the existing parking space, the third parking space. Given the equities on this, I feel like the more reasonable approach would be the single variance. Again, I would leave that to the discretion of the board to direct us if you feel otherwise.
are you saying that the current driveway width is over 27 feet or is 27 feet in the front of that house now?
It exceeds 27 feet. I believe it's at least 29 feet. I've measured it out by scale, and so it would width-wise, it would take 11 feet out of the 18 feet required if you were parking sideways across it. So you would, the major portion of the automobile, that street parking behind that space would be behind the parking space. So no other party would be parking there, that isn't aware of blocking in the tenant's parking space.
I understand that. The parking in the street blocking the vehicle, the parking control would automatically be ticketing it, because you can't block a driveway. So that we really can't take into consideration. I would respectfully request that this be continued till you talk to the ward councilor and see if you're taking some of the open space. You would have to get a variance for open space as well as the front yard parking. But I would first ask that you respectfully speak to the ward councilor to see if he's in favor of that.
I've asked him to meet at the site. He wasn't available to do that, so I would ask again, if that's the wish of the board, we'd request a continuance to see about amending the application, and after a meeting with the ward council, at least an attempted correspondence.
What's the wish of the...
Is this an existing two-family?
No. No.
You said there was an apartment in the basement.
No, that's where we would put it. That's where it would...
Oh, that's where
it
it's
would-
going to go?
Yes, that's where it's going to go.
So
It-
there's no apartment in here right now?
No. No, the rooms are, because it's in the basement, they're easily definable, but there's no one occupying, there's no apartment there.
Is there major construction that's going to go on here, where they're going to put a second floor in?
No, none at all. There's no expansion of the foundation, height, width, no exterior construction, only some, utility work in the basement and some doors and locks, and that's it.
Is there a motion to continue?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, the whole street. I'm looking at the whole street. I see it's all parking in front, and I'm agreeing with you. You can't approve something with parking on the street to block that off. So I'm agreeing, motion continue.
Question comes, the relief to be granted is to continue this matter to May 22nd at 4 p.m. Mr. Bacilli? Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes, continued till May 22nd. The next application before the board is application A1914, the application of Valerio Balbin and Maria Perez, 18 Folsom Street, Revere, requesting parking in the rear yard, width of two-way driveway, and number of building stories variances to enable the appellant to convert a single-family dwelling to a two-family dwelling at 18 Folsom Street, Revere.
I'm Rod Rivera, the construction supervisor and the designer for the project. I'm going to pass on to my partner now.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Viviana Gonzalez Viana, and I am the designer for this project. And over here are the owners, Alirio Medina and Maria Medina.
If you could kindly state your name and address for the record, because you were talking in the distance, so he could not
I
understand you.
apologize. Viviana Gonzalez Viana, and my address is 97 Beach Street, Malden.
And the spelling of your last name is?
Gonzalez Viana, Gonzalez, space Viana.
Okay, thank you. And do you wish to add anything, or did the presentation that took place last month was sufficient? There's no new information you need to add?
We did not make a presentation. This is our first meeting.
Yeah, these
Oh, I'm sorry, this is a new one. Okay. So, please make your presentation.
Okay, so this application is in connection with the conversion of a one family to a two family. We had already had received a permit from the building inspector on September 26, 2018, and the permit stood while the construction went on for 2.5 months. And on December 26, we got a cease and desist order, December 11, sorry, cease and desist order, and we were told that there were two violations on the construction, and the construction was going according to the plans that had been submitted, and we were told that we exceeded the 2.5 stories and that the parking couldn't go in the back. And then we went for a plan review, and then they added the width of the driveway exceeded also for a two-way driveway. We proposed to put the 4 parking spaces in the back of the building, and that's one of the variances we're seeking. And if that cannot be done, then we hope that we can get only 2 cars in the driveway in tandem. We were seeking to put the cars in the back because there is already congestion in that part of the city on the street, and we're just, right now they have only 2 vehicles, and hoping to just park in the back and not add to the congestion on that street. In regards to the 2.5 stories, the story was already there. There were 2 dormers proposed and already built when the cease and desist order was received. In fact, all the framing had been done, and it had been covered. Only part of the existing structure on the exterior was still not covered from the elements, and we went into the winter time when this happened. The owners were seeking to improve the residence for their use. They have a family that were going to live in the basement unit, and they were seeking also to upgrade the obsolete electrical and also heating systems in the building. But when they went to seek the permit for the electrical, that's when the problems arise. There are other buildings in the area. There are also 2 families with the same lot area, and even larger buildings. The addition of the second unit is not going to change the footprint of the house, and we're just adding inside.
Okay, my major concern is that you said you received a building permit to put a 2-family unit in there. What was the plan that you presented to the building department?
The same exact plans that you guys have.
Yes, there is only one difference, and the difference is that the plans that we presented had 3 parkings in the back. So we added a 4 parking in the back after we received the cease and desist, saying that we require another parking. But they already had granted the permit, allowed construction for 2.5 months.
They were, I'm dumbfounded. They were allowing you to convert to a 2-family. Can I see that building permit that states that?
You want to make this part of the record?
Okay, anything else to present?
No, it has been a
Okay.
great distress financially to the owners.
Okay, but seeing that this is a public hearing, I have to ask if there's any proponents, and I believe the ward councilor for that area would like to speak. Proponents. But the ward councilor? Okay. Are there any proponents? Hearing none, I'll close. Are you a proponent? In favor? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents?
Mr. Chairman, when that building permit was issued, it was a grave mistake. They didn't realize it until months later that that was taking place. Once they came in for another permit for the electrical, they realized a grave error was made. This was never really intended to be a two-family. And I'll just give you a little history on the property. The current owners are only here a year and a half in this home. And since that day that they've come upon this property, they've expanded the top, made additional rooms upstairs, and now they want to go downstairs. And they were doing this, I might add, Mr. Chairman, without a building permit, until I interceded and said, there's something wrong here, you need a building permit. And so that's when inquiries would start to be made, and they said, there's no way in the world they can issue a building permit. Then they uncovered a mistake was made. This property is overbuilt to begin with. Folsom Street, as it is today, is the biggest headache I have in Ward 3. Heavily congested with traffic, and all these other businesses were grandfathered. We are on a daily basis in court with the people at the first property, the old bus line. The courts remanded us back to us for a vote, and we sent it back saying we want to litigate. We don't want that to be used as a body shop. So we're working hard to make Folsom Street a better property for all the people who live there. This would not do justice to the neighbors. How would you like to be sitting in your backyard in your pool and there be a parking lot right next to you with 4 vehicles? That is not what the properties were intended to be. Our homes were built to be our homes, not income-producing properties. If you can't afford a property, then you buy a lesser property. That's the way the system works. But now I see there's a new trend out there that you buy a property and you turn it into a major business. And that is what's causing more grief in our community. Come tomorrow night, we're going to have a tremendous revision in our parking arrangements overnight. We're going to finally get resident parking throughout the whole city. And so we recognize that there's a major problem with cars parking. So this is going to only add to that. So I ask that you, and I'm here on behalf, not only on behalf of some of the neighbors, and a couple of the neighbors are elderly and sick and that, and they can't physically be here. We do have 2 neighbors that are here, and I'm voicing my concern for them. They chose not to speak. I would like to speak on their behalf because they vehemently oppose this. And these are long-term, revered people who invested their whole lives in this site. Now, someone comes in within a year and a half and starts to change the whole concept of what these people enjoyed for all these years. I don't think that's what we really want to do. I don't think that's a good idea for any community. That's not growth, that's intrusion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and I ask that you deny the application, and I see that one of the abutters is going to come up and speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lenny Olandello. I live at 22 Folsom Street, right aside of the person that wants to add the 2-family, and I have mixed emotions about being here. They've been there for about a year and a half. They're very nice people. I have nothing against them. They seem to be cleaning up the property. My problem is with the cars on the street and the parking. The parking is paramount on Folsom Street like it is throughout the whole city. Everybody knows what it's like. And there's just not parking as it is now. You add another family, and you're adding 2, 3, possibly more cars. And I'm a little confused about where the second apartment is going to go anyway, if it's going to be, because they already added a dormer in the attic, and now they're doing, is the second story going in the basement? Is that where the second family is going? Okay, so what she just said was the second family is going in the basement, which means there's going to be a family there. Now, they just put 2 bedrooms with a bathroom in the attic. with a dormer. So that's 4 more people at a minimum, and that's 5, 6 more cars. And with the parking permit coming online, the way I understand it, every person gets 1 permit for their car. Me and my wife have a car each. We'll get a permit each, and we'll get 2 guest permit parkings. That could be a potential 6. So if they had 2 families, they could have 4 cars with permits and 8 more guest permit parking spaces. It probably will never happen, but that's a potential 12 cars for that house. So that's my concern, is the parking and the traffic. Like Arthur said, the top of our street, there's 4 businesses up there. And those cars are all over Folsom Street. And you got Carlton Street that has houses on both sides, but parking on one side. And all those cars come up and park on Folsom Street. And I just don't know how we're going to fit any more cars on that street. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. I did receive a phone call, a message left on my machine regarding Folsom Street saying that they were opposed to an expansion at this address, and they were concerned on how they could put 4 parking spaces in the back of the building. I don't even know if there would be a turning radius to get any of those parking spaces out. It's not depicted, but that's very difficult. I think that you'd have to move 2 cars in order to get the last 2 cars out on the left. Could the applicant tell us what's the distance from the front of the car to the stairs, the proposed deck?
14 feet, 5 inches. Oh. Is that the plot plan?
And that's to the proposed deck?
Yes.
That's still a very tight, okay.
And like I said, they could go on tandem on the side if the parking on the back is an issue for the neighborhood. They don't want to disrupt the neighborhood. They don't want to make it bad. They want to make it better. And this is not for rental. It's for the family.
Okay.
Question now comes on granting the relief requested by the appellant. Mr. Bacilli? No. Mr. D'Angelo? No. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? No. Mr. Pelton? No. Mr. Tucker?
No.
No. This is denied.
Thank you, members of the commission.
You're welcome.
The next application before the board is application A1915, the application of Amanda McCordy and Sean McKill, 18 Green Street, Revere, to enable the appellants to construct a 500 square foot addition to an existing dwelling at 18 Green Street, Revere.
Hello?
Hi, could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. Amanda McGordy, 18 Green Street, Revere, Massachusetts.
Okay. And do you wish to add anything, or the application speaks for itself?
I'm just stating that we're requesting a variance. The house is situated on the lot, kind of in a wonky position. So the rear addition that we're looking to do is upstairs, but because the existing house is already outside of the side setback requirements, anything that we added on would also be outside of that. And then we're looking to straighten out a bay that is in the front that's triangular currently to make it a rectangular bay. And we have, if it's helpful, additional copies of the plans. No? Okay.
Okay. Seeing that this is a public hearing, I will ask if there's any proponents, anyone in favor? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. Any opponents? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, I'll close that side of the hearing. And have you spoken to the ward councilor in this area regarding this application?
No, we've spoken to our neighbors, and they
Okay.
were on board with it.
Green Street would be Charlie Patch? No?
It's near the police station and the fire station.
So that would have been Ira? Is that Ira? Do you know who your ward counselor is down there? Is it McKenna or Ira Novoselsky?
I'm not sure. It's right adjacent to Route 1. Right where that lady had the diner that she wants to do a garage, it's right adjacent to that overpass. It's the first street after the overpass. Lee's Trailer Park is at the end of the street, if that's helpful. It's kind of an eyesore. You might have gotten complaints about that. I don't know. And we're the second smallest house on the street by a fairly significant portion. So this isn't something that's going to be overbuilding or oversized. Our house is currently approximately 1,000 square feet. There's several houses that are between 2,200 to over 3,200 square feet on the road. So there's only one house that's smaller. I think they're about 900 and something square feet, but we're the second smallest house.
So the proposed addition is to the rear of the property, am I correct?
So there's two proposed additions. The main significant one is to the rear of the house, on the upstairs. And if you kind of look in the plans that we've given out, you can kind of see this is what the rear addition, this is the existing house, and this is what the rear addition looks like.
Were those pictures presented? If you could just, I'll pass it around. That's- Okay, they're just hard to see with the, yeah, this is much more clear if you want to review it in the color, but that does show it.
Yeah, so as far as what's not within the setback allowances, that rear addition, because of the existing house, the side of the house is already not within the setback, because it's where it's placed on the plot. And then in the front, we have a triangular bay, so we're not looking to build beyond the triangular bay, but that's already, the existing bay is again outside of the setback allowances. And so we just want to straighten out that bay to make it a rectangle instead of a triangle, but not build beyond where the point of the triangle already is. Some square footage, it's just a small house, and so, yeah, that's it, just to make it a little larger, to have a family. Yep. Mm-hmm.
You're essentially going to raise the roof in the front of the house to make it square with the rest of the building?
The roof?
Right?
Oh, in the front, yes, but that's within the existing setback
And then you're going to take that little triangle
parameters.
off and make it straight across?
Yeah, so the triangle piece is what's not within the setback. That existing bay is already outside of the setback
Okay, and then you're
allowance.
going to raise the back of the building on top of that little porch?
Yes,
And
yes.
that, you're not changing the footprint per se, you're just going to raise...
Other than that triangle, I guess, if you want to think about
Yeah,
that,
but that's-
changing the footprint.
Okay.
But yeah, the back would simply be a cantilevered upstairs. There's no extension on the base footprint of the house. It would just be upstairs. Just to make the house a little more functional.
And you're
'cause
going
it's
to
a tiny
keep it a
house.
single family?
Yeah, it's our house.
It's not changing? Okay.
Now, the neighbor to the left of the house, you have already spoken to them? To the left, facing the front, to the left, yes.
Yes.
Because I didn't get any calls. To the right, you have,
I'm trying to think if you're saying to the left. Oh, Sika. So he owns several properties on the street, including a 2 homes and an auto body shop, and so he's.
and there's no I didn't get anything from them. Okay. All righty.
Question comes on granting the relief requested by the appellant. Mr. Bacilli? Mr. Bacilli?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Lopes is absent. Mr. Mazzoni? Yes. Mr. Pelton? Yes. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yes, this is granted. No further business. Next meeting is...
Thank you very much.
You just have to wait the 21 days until you get a letter from the clerk to do anything. Don't do anything till you get the letter.
Can I ask a question? We actually applied, we know it's not approved for a permit, so we did it ourselves, just kind of thinking we needed to do it for this. Our contractor, should he just reapply separately, or should?
Having no further business, we're adjourned.